Welcome back to the channel. Today is episode 2 of My Wife Picks a Criterion. Of course, my wife Jessi is here today.
Yeah, hi.
Hello. So this is a new feature on the channel that we've started where Jessi will go to my Criterion shelf, and I have over 250 titles in my Criterion shelf, and some of these movies she's already seen, but some of them she hasn't seen, and she will pick a Criterion, and then we will talk about it with you all. And so that's what we're doing today, and this is episode 2. So we're going to talk today about, as you probably could see from the thumbnail, Lost in America, which is a film with Albert Brooks and Julie Hagerty. It is spine number 887 from the Criterion Collection, a movie from 1985. It's 91 minutes, and I'm a big fan of Albert Brooks, and Jessi and I have watched Albert Brooks films before, but this is our first time, I think, watching this one in quite a while. I haven't seen this movie in a while, so I think last time we just started off with the kind of initial impressions of the movie, so do we want to talk about that first a little bit? And
yeah, we could do that.
Yeah.
I think I had seen this before, but I didn't really remember too many of the details. I was looking for something a little lighter, maybe a little humorous, but I also appreciate the serious elements of the film, although it doesn't get super serious, but kind of serious. I liked it. I thought it was entertaining, and it also made me think about a lot of things. I think it's an interesting film to revisit now, given the whole van life, nomadic lifestyle movement going on. It kind of touches on a lot of those things in 85 that people are doing now.
Right. I think probably we should have said in the first episode, we can't go back to the first episode now, but we probably should have said that if you're listening to this, we're going to spoil the movie. We're going to talk in detail about the film. So if you haven't seen Lost in America, watch the movie, and you can always come back to this discussion. So I'm just going to read a little bit of the back of it just so everyone gets kind of a sense of the movie. This is the first time I really read the back of it was today, because I've seen this movie a number of times. But in this hysterical satire of Reagan-era values, I didn't realize it was a satire of Reagan-era values, written and directed by Albert Brooks, a successful Los Angeles advertising executive played by Albert Brooks, and his wife, Julie Hagerty, decide to quit their jobs, buy a Winnebago, and follow their easy rider fantasies of freedom and the open road. So that's the basic story of the movie. And I really I have to say, if we're going to get into some details about the movie, I really love the opening of the film. So during the credits of the movie, the camera stays focused on a radio, at least to begin with, or there's a radio show going on in the background. And I think it's Larry King talking with Rex Reed, who is a famous movie critic. And they're talking about films, and they're talking about a lot of different things. But I really like that opening of the movie where he just rolls the credits on top of that, and you finally get into a discussion that Albert Brooks starts to have with his wife, and they're in bed. And so I thought that was just a really funny way to open a movie, and I really had forgotten that the movie opened up that way, that it was just a radio program. I love listening to the radio, so that, I was already hooked, from the beginning.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting opening. The radio program is happening over top of the credits, and then the images are of moving boxes because they're moving out of their house. And I thought previously I hadn't really paid attention to what the radio program is talking about. I think there's a lot to kind of take in visually because there are moving boxes and we haven't even met the characters yet, and so we're trying to just figure out what's going on. But on the program, they're talking about watching comedy films and films to critique alone, and if he'd rather watch them in an empty theater to watch on his own, or in a packed theater to kind of bump up the numbers. And he says something about, I don't need someone to tell me or to remind me to laugh when I watch a film. If it's funny, I'll laugh out loud. And I think that kind of sets up the whole film with this decision. Do we want to do what everyone else is doing, or do we want to maybe think on our own and make decisions because we need to make those decisions, not because everybody else is laughing? Do we want to laugh because it's funny, or laugh because that's what everybody else is doing during the film and maybe in a bigger sense in life?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was an interesting discussion too, because I feel like it's harder to laugh if you're in a theater, as an example. And I just remember this back from my days in the theater. If you have a smaller crowd, it's hard to make a small group of people laugh because they feel self-conscious about it, right? They don't want to necessarily laugh. Now, Rex Reed's talking about his process of going into a movie theater. He talks about liking to watch movies in the morning, right? He wants to watch them in the morning.
10 in the morning, yeah.
And I mean, we like watching movies in the morning too, but I always feel like it's helpful if you're with somebody because you're kind of sharing the laugh. But I totally agree with you. I think it's a good way to open the film and to open up that discussion about whether you want to go with the crowd or go not with the crowd.
Right.
Yeah. I thought that was a good way to kind of get into it. But, for me, like I said, I always feel if I was in a movie theater by myself, if I saw a comedy, I would be more amused. I would be less likely to maybe laugh on my own, I feel like. I mean, that's what but if you're with a crowd and everyone else is laughing, you might be more prone to laugh.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, I thought this was really interesting. And then, right after the credits roll, Albert Brooks and Julie Haggerty, they're in bed. They've bought a new house, apparently. At least it comes out in the discussion that that's what they've done. Albert Brooks is worried. Now, Albert Brooks traditionally plays kind of a worried character in movies, I feel like.
Yeah.
He always has some anxiety about something.
Yeah, I didn't, I think I knew of him in a lot of roles, but I didn't know his name, I guess. And I might totally screw this up, but he's Marlin in Finding Nemo, right?
He is, yeah, you're right.
So
you're right
he's
about
always
that,
kind of these worrying characters, or I think in This Is 40, he's the father. And so I had seen him in a lot of films, but I didn't know who he was. And so, yeah, I think he's kind of this in-between guy. I think in the discussion they've sold their house, and they're having second thoughts about it. They've bought a new house that they're working on, and they're relying on his potential promotion at work to pay for the new house. And the discussion is about being responsible, which I thought was very relatable because I feel like I put a lot of pressure on myself to be very responsible and make the right decision, even though that's not really a thing. And so I thought it was interesting that they were in bed, like the morning or evening. Is it morning?
I think it's evening.
Evening.
Yeah.
The night before.
Because he goes to sleep in the garage, or
right.
He says, I'm going to go sleep in the garage at the end of the conversation.
And then he's like, oh, I'm not going to do that. What am I, an animal? Yeah. Yeah, so they're talking about like the last night in the house, and they're worried that they've already made a bad decision.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is a common theme, as you were talking about, just being responsible, being irresponsible. What does that mean? Are you taking a risk? Is it good to take a risk? Do you want to be safe? There's a lot of questions that get brought up that I think as an audience member, you can really relate to that, right? If you've ever had those kind of thoughts about, should I be responsible and do this? Or should I take a risk and go on vacation or do something different, right? That's the big question there. I wanted to go back, too, because my first introduction to Albert Brooks is Albert Brooks used to do short films for Saturday Night Live, and that's where I got first introduced to him.
Okay.
And I was just telling this story. One of my favorite stories of Albert Brooks is when he was doing a short film for Saturday Night Live. Apparently he would deliver these short films, and they would be shown or not shown. I'm not sure what the regularity on showing the films was, but he had to deliver a film. And there was one film that I remember in particular that where he had the flu, he had a cold or something like that, and he still had to deliver a film. So he basically put the camera in his bedroom. He had Kleenexes all around. He ordered a pizza and things like that. And I just thought from the beginning, that's my first introduction to Albert Brooks, and I've really enjoyed his work ever since that. Modern Romance, which I think has an Indicator release, is one of my favorite films. So it was so great to see this on Criterion. And he really brings up a lot of the anxieties I feel like I have that you and I have talked about before, too. He really brings those things to the surface about all these questions and what should we do and things like that. And I also feel like you get to a point in your life where you're thinking, do I stay with my regular job that I always have, or do I really kind of branch out and maybe take some time off and go on a vacation or go on an adventure to just experience life? So he's wrestling with something that I feel like is universal in many ways, because many times after you leave school, you go into a job and you stay in that job for a certain amount of time, and then that's your life, right?
Yeah.
So
and I think the way he portrays the anxiety is very realistic. It feels real and relatable as opposed to elevated to be funny. It's not, I don't feel like he's deliberately funny. I don't think he's trying to always land a laugh like you may do on SNL versus in a film. I think what he has to say or what he does is just, it's inherently funny or it's not. Like there's scenes later where they're having discussions and arguments, and whatever he says off the cuff, I mean, I know it's not off the cuff, it's a scripted film, but it feels off the cuff, it feels realistic, and you can find the humor in it, and you can also find the seriousness in the weight of what they're talking about. I guess I'm thinking of a bit further in the film when they go to the Hoover Dam and they're in the parking lot at the visitor center or whatever, and they're having a heated discussion about how this is their life now, and he just, the way he speaks is funny, but it's also very serious. They're like, we did this, we live in the Winnebago now, and the parking lot at the Hoover Dam is our front yard, and how did we get here? Right,
and it makes you feel anxious at that point in the movie. I want to just go back before we get to that point too, where you can tell from the discussion that they initially have, where Julie Haggerty gets up and she goes to work, that she's been thinking herself that maybe something is happening in the relationship where she's kind of bored, and she even has a discussion with one of her coworkers about maybe getting a divorce or maybe doing something different. So she's having all these other thoughts that maybe she hasn't shared with Albert Brooks. And I do agree that some of the things that he says are they seem like they're just improv or off the cuff. And he's very funny that way, right?
Yeah.
The dialogue is very funny. So she's going through something that she hasn't really disclosed to him. Maybe they've talked about it before, maybe they haven't, but he's feeling uneasy, she's feeling uneasy, so it feels like there needs to be a change, but they're not really sure what that is. They think it's the new house, but then eventually it turns out to, I guess we can start to talk about the next part of the film, which is that Albert Brooks is expecting a promotion.
Yeah.
He has this expectation. He goes to the office. There's a big scene in the office, a hilarious scene in the office where his expectations are totally blown away, basically, right? Because because he's expecting to see this promotion and it just doesn't happen for him. And he's like,
yeah.
Well, what do you mean it didn't happen? I worked all this time. I spent 8 years at this company and I'm not going to get promoted. And so I feel like that's another common thing too, where people, especially in business, you're maybe working for a company and you have this expectation that you're going to move up the ladder and you're going to get promoted. And that doesn't happen. Yeah. That doesn't always happen the way you expect it to happen. So I feel like that's another place where, as an audience member at watching this movie, you can really relate to that, right?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. In the beginning, they're talking and he is maybe just having second thoughts about the house. Is this the right house? Are we doing the right thing? And she is kind of just going along with it. But then later, when we really get into more of her character, she spent the morning at the new house choosing tile, I think. And she picks this like burnt orange tile or something. And the person she works with is like, oh, that'll be nice. And she's like, I hate it. I hate this house already. And I don't even live there. And so then we start to realize that while he maybe has been trying to focus on what's happening, although he may be a little unsure, she's already kind of moved forward and said, I already think I hate this. And we haven't even done it yet. And then we transition into him not getting the promotion. Instead of getting the promotion, he is supposed to transfer to New York City to work on a different project. And so then that is kind of the tipping point and last straw for him. And he's like, all right, I've been waiting for this. This is supposed to be the last piece of the puzzle, and it's not going to happen. So now he's kind of second-guessing everything. And so after that scene, he goes to her work, right, and says, quit your job. I just did. And so they kind of use that energy to kind of dream really big, which I think for these characters is not a thing they usually do. And I found that also very relatable because, it's one thing to watch van life videos on YouTube and to think about, oh, what would life look like if we did this? But it's another thing to say, let's do it, right?
Right. And the other thing you realize, too, is that when he says that, quit your job, she doesn't really want to do it. She doesn't really want to do it. She's not ready to do that yet. She's ready for other things to change in the relationship, but not her job. She's like, my boss is not even here. I can't even quit to anybody, which is kind of a funny thing, too, right? And so I feel like, they're both kind of in different places, and they're going through this transformation, and they're learning as they go, which is again, part of the, comedy. It's not jokes, right? It's the situation that really puts them in this, predicament, if you will. They expected to get a house, and all of a sudden now he's lost his job. She's faced with the decision to quit her job as well. So they decide to get this Winnebago, which is hilarious. I really feel like, and of course,
I think it's a great scene when they're kind of, she's warming up to the idea, and they're sitting around their kitchen table, and they're looking at the newspapers, right, and looking at houses in Connecticut and houses in other places, and how much money they're spending. They realize to live in L.A. And now that he potentially was supposed to work in New York, they're kind of dreaming beyond where they live, right? Oh, we could get so much land and a house in Connecticut. Oh, we can get this and that here. Or what about traveling? We can go everywhere. And he's like, oh, I've already looked up Winnebagos and all of that. And so they ultimately decide to get a Winnebago, and there's a detailed discussion about how much money they have, and selling the house will get them this, and getting out of their new house contract will get them this money. And they realize they have something about like $140,000, right? And they're like, well, how many years are we going to get out of $140,000 if we have a Winnebago?
Right.
That's life.
He's done all the math, right? He's done all the math, and he thinks he's got it all figured out and everything like that. It's funny that she stays all day at work, and he goes home and starts reading all these things. So he's all ready to go. So at this point in the film, she basically goes with it, and she quits her job, right? And then they get this Winnebago, and then we're on the road, Easy Rider style. We're on the road, and they do talk about Easy Rider quite a bit in the film. I haven't seen Easy Rider in a long time, but it is a road picture where free love and free everything. You're on the road, and it's the open road basically is what it is. So so their first stop is Las Vegas, right?
Because they're supposed to get remarried.
They're supposed to get remarried. That's right.
Vegas.
That's right.
Yeah.
So the thing that comes to mind at the beginning is they pull up to this chapel, and he wants to get married at night, and she's like, "Why don't we stay in a hotel? Let's have one last night before we're on the open road. Let's stay in a hotel. We'll get married tomorrow morning. We'll have room service. We'll get a suite or whatever."
Yeah, his big line is, "We've dropped out of society," right? They say that.
That's right.
He says it several times. He wants to get married right away. He wants to camp out under the stars. He doesn't want to stay in Vegas. And she wants to go to the hotel for one night. We'll come back first thing in the morning and get married. We'll move on. But we'll have one last night in Vegas. And so they go to the hotel. He tells the person at the desk that they've dropped out of society and they want a suite for the night. They do not have a reservation. And it's pretty funny because the suite is not
very small. It's not, again, this is another situation where what they expect is not what happens, right?
Right.
They're expecting this bridal suite. I just love the scene, as you kind of alluded to, when they're at the front desk and he says, "We've dropped out of society." And the funny thing about that, too, is Julie Haggerty, the wife, she seems to have more street smarts than he does, right? She's like, "Well, give him some money and see if we can get the bridal suite," because of the hotel is booked. He's trying to convince the hotel clerk that, hey, we've dropped out of society, give us a break. And he does this throughout the movie, too, which I'm realizing also, life, please give us a break because we've decided to make this big decision. Please go along with us. He's kind of saying, and she basically says, you got to give him some money if you want to get the good room, right?
Yeah, and it's a great scene because he gives him like, I don't know, like
10 $50. Well, it's like $50, I think, at the end.
He gives him a couple bills, and it doesn't do anything. And then she's like, "We'll give him more." And he's like, "Well, how much are we going to give him?" So eventually he just flat out says, like, "Why don't you just tell me how much I should give you?" And he gives him $100, and they go up to the suite. They have this, great idea that they're going to take a bath together, and they're going to have a nice room, and it's going to be a suite, so it's going to have a living room, and it's going to be this whole big thing. And it's very disappointing when they arrive. Yeah,
and the other thing, too, is this is the point where, again, I know we said this in the beginning, but we are spoiling this movie, so there's a big spoiler coming up here, and this is really kind of the middle of the movie, and really the major impact that you hear in the movie, or that you see in the movie at this point. They're in the room. They're in the junior bridal suite is what they called it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, he's like, "Is there a senior bridal suite?"
Yeah, and all of a sudden, she says she's going to take a shower, and then he falls asleep. And so the next scene you see is the alarm clock. He's in bed. They push the beds together. He's pushed the beds together. Or it's maybe not even pushed the beds together, but he's laying across both beds because he can't sleep on one, right?
Yeah, because the junior bridal suite has 2 small heart-shaped beds. There's not even one.
Right, there's not even one there, yeah. And so he wakes up and she's gone. And you're like, what is going on? So he goes down to the casino floor in his bathrobe, and she's basically been gambling all night, which is the big reveal, the big surprise in the movie is that. And so you find out through the course of a couple of scenes that she's lost the nest egg. The nest egg is gone. All this money that they talked about in the beginning, they did all this planning at the kitchen table and said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to get this. We're going to go on the road. We've got a Winnebago, etc. She's lost it all. And, this is, I think, a really transformative part in the movie where, they really are realizing they don't know each other anymore in a way, because she has apparently this character flaw that came out where she just felt, her idea of freedom was to take all this money and gamble it away, apparently. So it's kind of funny. I mean, this is a part too where I guess I was surprised at this viewing because I thought it was funny, and I looked over at you, and I know you kind of got serious, and I was realizing to myself, you're right, because this is a serious thing that's happening right here. Even though it's very laughable that and there's a lot of scenes that are very funny, the dialogue's very funny, etc. But at the same time, it's very scary because this is all the money they ever had, right?
Yeah.
And so that's something else that's very relatable. I think we work our lives and we try to save as much as we can, but to have it all gone in one night, you can relate so much to what Albert Brooks is going through because he's in this panic at this point. So, anyway, I really thought that was interesting on my viewing. I always thought it was, a comedy. I would laugh a lot. I was laughing a lot at this viewing also, but then I recognized as from your reaction to it that it's also very serious at this point in the movie.
Yeah, I think for me, I knew it was, an on-the-road, travel, lifestyle change kind of film, but I realized more watching it this time, how central the relationship really is, and how in the beginning she's a very quiet person. She doesn't really have too many opinions. She has a very soft voice. Her delivery is not that Albert Brooks is loud, but she's very soft and quiet compared to his character, who maybe has larger outbursts. He feels things, outwardly, whereas she doesn't really share things, but her delivery is kind of soft. And I really, kind of saw how their relationship changes. Like you said, when she's talking to her friend at work, she's thinking about divorce. She's thinking about really changing her life, not their life. And he's thinking about how can we do things different? How can we use what time and effort and money we have to do something together? And in the first chance they get to do something together, spend this night together in this suite that isn't, maybe was a little sad, but they could still, it's the first night of their new life. She does something completely independent that really messes up the whole relationship later. And then once they leave Vegas, they go to the Hoover Dam. They, I think they shared that they have about $850 out of $140,000 left. And so they're not, he immediately is like, well, we have to save the food. We have to, he's going into like survival mode. Like, how are we going to live the rest of our lives on $800? And, she's kind of like, oh, it'll be fine, whatever. And they have a real big argument about it because he hasn't exploded on her yet and said, I'm upset with you. He's upset, but he hasn't shared his emotions yet.
Yeah, it's really funny how she reaches a level of acceptance that it takes him a long time to get there, right? She's already been, the money's gone, but we're going to continue on. We're going to go on with $800 or whatever it is. But I love how he kind of fights with reality too. One of my favorite scenes in the movie is with Gary Marshall, who plays the owner of the casino. Now, Gary Marshall, also a director and a great choice, a great casting choice for that too. He has a very thick accent. He looks like a casino owner, and Albert Brooks pleads with him to say, listen, we made a mistake. Again, it's this whole dialogue about we dropped out. Please, he's like asking the universe almost to say, please help us out here. can you just, and he kind of makes this, they talk about Miracle on 34th Street too, and the whole comparison between Gimbel's and Macy's, right?
Yeah.
Where in Miracle on 34th Street, Gimbel's or Macy's has a program where they will, if they don't have the item, they'll send you to another store, which is kind of an interesting idea and a good kind of a marketing thing. And Albert Brooks, since he's a person in marketing and sales, he tries to convince Gary Marshall to give the money back, and of course he's not going to do that. Of course Gary Marshall's not going to do that. But it's just so funny looking at Gary Marshall. He's playing with his rings, he's listening to what he has to say, and then eventually he says, "We're done here. We're not going to do this. We're not giving your money back. It's not going to happen." So then they're on the road again, as you said, and I think the explosive moment comes at Hoover Dam. They're like, well, where are we going to go now? Well, Hoover Dam. Let's go to Hoover Dam. So they have this big explosive scene at Hoover Dam where he talks about the nest egg, concept. This is another funny part of the movie, but it's also, he's obviously very anxious about it. They've lost their nest egg.
Right.
And I love all the dialogue about you can't use the word nest and you can't use the word egg. And it's, what did he say? Things on toast instead of eggs.
A bird lives in a stick.
In a round stick. A bird lives in a round stick. And there's,
you like things on toast.
From now on, you can't use the word nest or egg. It's a really funny scene, and it's really explosive for him. And I think things start to really get out of control for him, too, because Julie Haggerty, she's in complete acceptance mode. She's really accepting this on-the-road concept. She tries to hitchhike and gets in a car, which panics Albert Brooks even further. I'm getting panicked even thinking about all the stuff that he has to go through. He's got to get in the Winnebago, follow this, car. She's gotten into this car with a stranger, and she's like, Julie Haggerty's she's okay with it. She's into the open road concept. Yeah. And Albert Brooks is fighting it, which is something I'm just realizing as we're talking about this too. He's fighting what he wanted in the beginning, this open road concept, right? And she's like all into it. So,
yeah, I think that scene for me is when I really realized that the relationship was more central than the just being on the road. Because once they're on the road, that's all they have is each other and the vehicle that they also live in. And she very quickly is okay with leaving. She's lost the money. He's trying to keep, to put the pieces together to figure out how they can live for the rest of their lives, making this decision they've made. And she's walking to the, the Snackateria or something like that at the Hoover Dam, and they get into an argument, and he's following her, and based on their discussion, she just sticks her thumb out and starts hitchhiking right there, and a guy stops, and she just gets in the car and leaves. And so, for me, it was clear that he is trying to keep the relationship together. He wanted to get remarried. He wanted to renew their vows. And she's kind of maybe checked out. And it was very easy for her to leave. And then I feel like he's looking for her, but he kind of just happens to find the car at this diner. And then eventually they end up getting back together. But it's just interesting how all of a sudden she could use all the money and then she could leave, and then he's a lone man with $800 in a Winnebago, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, eventually they wind up, we're kind of getting to the end of the movie here, or closer to the end of the movie, but they wind up in this kind of trailer park, right, where they park the Winnebago. They only have a certain amount of money left. They realize they have to get jobs at this point. I think they're in Arizona.
Yeah, once
they make it to Arizona.
Once he finds her again and they get back together, she's like, okay, we've worked through what's happening. Here's where we're at now. We have, this amount of money, and where are we supposed to go? And he's like, well, I think we can only go to Arizona and New Mexico. And she says, well, I like Arizona. And so they drive until they find this town. I don't even remember what it's called. They say, oh, that looks like a good place to live. And they just pull in, and they end up parking in like a motorhome trailer park where other people are living in Winnebagos, and they're all a lot older than this couple is. I think they're in their 30s probably, and everybody else is more retired. Right. So they live in this community together. Right,
and the funny thing, again, I'm realizing as we're talking through the film again, you realize the open road concept lasted for like a day and a half because they're basically back in kind of a house to get jobs again after 2 days. They're in Arizona, and so he gets a job as a crossing guard, and she gets a job as a manager at a Wiener Schnitzel.
Yeah.
If I said that, I didn't say that right at all, but it's a Der Wiener Schnitzel or something like that.
Yeah.
Schnitzel, right?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yep.
So, very quickly from here, too, they realize that they've recreated their lives on a smaller scale in this trailer park. And, I don't think really too much happens at, it's a pretty short movie, right? 91 minutes. And so they have a short conversation at some point, and they say, what if we just go to New York City and get the job back, right? That's essentially the way it winds up.
He's working as a crossing guard. He's getting taunted by the kids pretty badly.
Yeah, pretty badly.
They're pretty cruel
Mm-hmm.
on their bikes. And then he sees early on in the film, he gets to work and he's waiting for his meeting to talk about the promotion. He's ordering a Mercedes over the phone, right? And then when he's the crossing guard, he sees the Mercedes that he was going to buy if he had gotten the promotion. He sees it, and I think that kind of reminds him of the life he was going to have as a marketing executive and this life that they had. And so I think that kind of puts the New York idea in his head, like maybe I could go back, maybe they'll take me back, maybe we could try that. But he doesn't say anything. And he gets home, and she got the job, she's the manager. He finds out that she's the assistant manager. The manager of the Wiener Schnitzel is like an 18-year-old kid who is he's fine with whatever's going on. He sees her value, but then she kind of is like, maybe we should go to New York.
Maybe we should just go back, yeah.
So he's like, well, I have an idea, but I want to hear yours first. And she's like, well, I've been thinking about New York. He's like, yeah, you've been thinking about I go back and eat it, and we go back to New York. So then they pretty quickly escalate to driving the Winnebago to New York City.
Right, yeah. I'm glad you brought up that scene, too, with the Mercedes, because there is a funny scene in the beginning, and if I remember the extra features also, I believe the Mercedes salesman is him. He's talking with the salesman in the beginning, and they're picking like insides and extras and stuff for the Mercedes that he's going to get. And I think it's him. I think he is talking with himself. He does the other side of the dialogue on the phone. And so when he sees this Mercedes in Arizona, he's like, I think that's the point where he says, we should just go back to New York, because we're basically doing the same thing anyway, just with less money.
Right.
And so he realizes, and in a way, I think as a couple, they realize that they've gone through this thing for a couple of days, which is hilarious in itself. But they've realized together, they've grown so much, I think, over these couple of days that they realize they had a pretty good life after all, right? And so they decide to go back to it. Or maybe that's the life that they feel more accustomed to and it's more familiar to them. And the open road maybe is not for them, right? I mean, I think that's what they realize.
I think they have a discussion where they talk about how they've been on the road or living this life for 2 weeks. And I think she says something, or I don't remember who exactly says it, but they basically mention like, well, we haven't gotten divorced yet, so I don't think we're going to. So maybe we should just go to New York. And then, that also kind of ties into indirectly all these houses they saw in Connecticut and things like that. And so they kind of had been thinking about New York in some way, without directly thinking he's going to go to his job, more that like they could get more for their money near, on the East Coast. And I think the transition from Arizona to New York City is nice. It's over maybe 3 minutes. Do they play the song through that? Yeah,
and that's something also Albert Brooks talks about in the supplements too, getting the rights to that song, and that was a big deal, right? And this is not a very I don't know how expensive it was to make, but this was part of the budget, is getting the rights to that music and talking to Frank Sinatra. I think he wrote a letter to Frank Sinatra. I'm not really sure, but there's a supplement on the Criterion release that kind of talks about how he did that. But it's a big part of the film, right? That's the end of the film.
Yep. So the end of the film, it's New York, New York. And in the very beginning of the film, when they're talking about him transferring to New York, a big selling point the new boss had was that they're supposed to be doing a Ford campaign, and they have the rights to New York, New York. And so they're going to put work forward into it. And he's like, that's a terrible idea, whatever. But it's interesting how they kind of foreshadow or tease that to the viewer, that they ended up getting the rights to the song to use in the
movie,
film.
In the movie, yeah.
And I think it's nice. I think we were talking about it after the fact, because, one of the lines in the song is, we can make it here, we can make it anywhere. And that's kind of what they did through the film, was that they figured out that they can make it together as a couple with nothing. And so they might as well try to live a different life, earning and living together like they were on the grid, not, in society.
No, yeah, exactly right. Anyway, I think, I mean, we're kind of winding it up here. Or winding down, I guess. I don't know. You winding down. This movie for me was a 4 out of 5. Last time we talked about kind of doing this 1 through 5 scale, which I think is fine. So I'm going to give this one a 4 out of 5. I don't know about you, but
yeah, I think after I watched it, it was more like a 3.5. But I think since we've talked about it, it's more of a 4. I also wanted to mention I really like the end. They give you like an update on their lives,
at,
yeah. And they actually really thrive in New York City. So I think that's nice that he got his job back and they're doing well. And she works for I don't know. Was it Bloomingdale's?
No, maybe.
She works for a department store.
Department store, yeah.
And they're having a baby.
Oh, that's right.
And so I like that they kind of show you, what decision they made after the fact. That it wasn't just about getting a job, getting more money, and maybe going back on the road, but they maybe realized that they have a place in society and they like being part of society.
Yeah, I mean the film is very transformative, right? They go through a transformation, which is nice to see in any film. And there's some learning there, and there's some comedy. So if you like all those elements, this movie might be for you. I really enjoyed it. I love Albert Brooks' work, and this is one of the better films, I think, of his. I mean, he's done a lot of great films. I know Defending Your Life is coming out, or it's already out from the Criterion Collection. Modern Romance, as I mentioned before, on Indicator. Lots of great films out there. We really like this one. I really love this feature. I think even as we talk, we try not to talk about these things too much when we're watching the film. I know you make some notes. Yeah. I should probably make some notes. I don't make as many notes, but I, kind of mental notes really more than anything else. But I really like the discussion because I feel like I'm learning something as we're talking about it because we haven't really talked too much about it after seeing the movie.
Yeah, I mean, typically when we see a film, we'll pause and talk about things while we're watching. We'll talk about things after the fact. Up to like several days after we've watched something. So I purposely am trying not to say too much, not to get too into the discussion after we watch it, just because I think it helps when we kind of surprise each other with the information or the reflection we have on the film. But yeah, I think it's a really great film. It's different from other road trip comedies. I think about like Vacation and even like Harold and Kumar, like those road trip comedies are more like slapstick. Like it's about the trip, it's about the funny hijinks situations they get into, and this is more I don't know, it's more thinking about what these decisions do for the characters as opposed to just being about getting to a destination, because they don't have a destination.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, the thing that I learned a lot about it, again, from through you, is that this film also is kind of a drama in a way, because they really do learn and grow, right? So it's more of a, it's not just a comedy, right? And so I guess I had always thought of it as having a lot of funny moments. Albert Brooks, very funny. Julie Haggerty, also very funny. So, but I learned that from you in watching this and watching your reactions too, which I think is really interesting. We watch a lot of stuff together, and so, and we have different reactions to different things and things that we like or things that we get into. And as you know from the channel, movies that I watch or movies that we watch are very much about mood.
Yeah. And
maybe the time in our life or how we're feeling. And, we have a lot of comfort films as well. So this is really cool. I'm really enjoying this. We hope you enjoy it as well. Leave us a comment below. Let us know if you've seen this film, if you like this film. Highly recommend it. Thanks to you, Jessi, also for being my producer and my editor. I really appreciate all that. You do such great work on these videos, and we really appreciate all of your support, too, on the channel. I love all the interaction. Let's keep the dialogue going in the comment section below. And we'll be doing more of these. I mean, we've done one every week, so we might do one of these every week. We might do some video on this. For right now, it's just audio only, but we might decide to do a video on these. Or maybe you have a suggestion of a film that you'd like us to see at some point, right? Right now we're focusing on the Criterion Collection. And again, the rules are that Jessi will pick a Criterion from the Criterion films that I have. Maybe it's something I've seen, maybe it's something that I haven't seen, and then we'll watch the film together, and then we'll share our reaction and our thoughts about it with every one of you. So thanks for listening today. We really appreciate it. I sincerely hope everyone is safe and well, and we'll talk to you soon.